What's up, my comic comrades? With The Boys Season 4 underway, we thought it'd be fun to talk about several of the biggest changes from the original comic series to the live-action TV series. Like all comic book and TV movie adaptations, they have made a number of important changes from the source material. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, and others that don't really matter one way or another. Either way, let's see where the biggest changes are in The Boys. One of the revisions the show made was the name for the character Mother's Milk and the origin of the name, which we got in The Boys issue 35. His first name in the comics is Baron, and in the show it's Marvin. Anyway, as for the origin of the nickname Mother's Milk, in the Boys comic, the mom of Baron Wallace, aka Mother's Milk, worked at a dog food cannery company while she was pregnant. The problem was the facility was previously a Vought Compound V lab that they failed to sanitize properly. This meant that Baron's mom was exposed to Compound V remnants that were in an unrefined state. This caused both Baron and his brother to be born with Compound V in their blood. His brother was also born mentally handicapped, and when his powers started to emerge years later, his body started to expand rapidly. Unfortunately, he was wearing a helmet at the time, and his skull was crushed due to his head growing in the helmet. It's extremely gruesome in normal boys fashion. Now, as for Baron, the side effect of being born with Compound V in his blood is that he constantly has to breastfeed or just drink his mother's breast milk, or he will straight up wither away and die. So naturally, since he needed his mother's milk to survive, he was given the nickname Mother's Milk. However, in the show, we got a way more straightforward reason for why he got the nickname. In the show, his real name is Marvin Milk, going by MM or Mother's Milk. Well, he eventually explains in this series that he was once a medic, and since medics take care and nurture, he was given the nickname Mother's Milk because of his nurturing and motherly ways. It's a bit odd, but it totally works for the show, and it's a way quicker explanation. Another big change in the comics is since he was born with Compound V in his blood, he's a suit possessing a level of superhuman strength. Dude even accidentally killed another boxer by punching his head off in a match, eventually leading him to join the boys. But as we know in the show, he's not a soup, so basically Mother's Milk was changed completely for the TV show. They also changed Queen Maeve's redemption for the show. As we know in the Boys TV series, Maeve, like the rest of the Seven, are forced to do whatever Homelander wants, as he will kill anyone who goes against him. So the Seven do some pretty horrible things to just about everybody, both because they think they're above the law and because of Homelander. Anyway, eventually Homelander finds out Maeve is a lesbian and then outs her on live television. This, with a myriad of past douchebag acts, sends Maeve over the edge, finally coming around to realize that Homelander and the Seven, which she is a member of, are horrible and the things they do are awful. So with her conscience finally coming around, she stands up to Homelander and loses her right eye in the process as he shoves his thumb in it. But she then stabs him in the ear, at which point she sees Soldier Boy about to explode himself to kill everyone in the vicinity. So she tackles him out a window to save the day, sacrificing herself. Although it's later revealed she actually survived and is starting a new secret life with her partner Elena, letting the world think she's dead. Now that's the show. In the comics, they decided not to give her such a redeeming arc or happy ending. In the comics, Maeve grows a conscience after a talk with Starlight in issue 63, who tells her, "You stood up for me once, with Black Noir and those other pricks." Now you'll probably just say, don't let it go to your head, but I'm going to make an ass out of myself and say there might be someone in there, somewhere down under all those layers. So after that conversation later in the issue, she goes after Homelander. She attacks him with the sword, swinging it at his head, but it just shatters on contact. He then just grabs her and says it's a metal prop. As he retaliates by punching her head off her body before Starlight can try to help, who Maeve had previously got rid of so she couldn't get involved. So her fate in the comics is way more tragic. Moving along, we have Stormfront, one of the best villains from the Boys TV series thus far. But did you know they changed the character completely? In the comics, Stormfront is a dude. In the show, they made her a woman who joins the Seven as their newest member. She ends up dating Homelander, and we also find out she's secretly a Nazi who wants to use her position in the Seven to promote and push her evil, intolerant agenda. She later ends up becoming severely injured and disfigured by Homelander's son Ryan as she goes to kill his mom in the season 2 finale. Now, while the comic version of Stormfront is also a Nazi, he was also a member of Payback, the second most popular superhero team in the Boys comic universe. He's still very much a parody of Shazam in the comics in terms of power set. However, the character is not as prominent in the comics as the show made her for season 2 of The Boys. In the comics, Stormfront also is injured and killed way different. We see him get into a fight with the female in issue 31 of the series and ends up getting one of his eyes plucked out by her. By issue 34, he gets ganged up on by the boys who beat him to death, crushing his nads and kicking in his skull. In the TV series though, Stormfront offs herself after sustaining serious injuries from Ryan. I actually think the TV version of Stormfront was way more compelling. Overall, The Boys show is way better than the comic series in our opinion, something that is extremely rare. How often do comic fans say, I wish they would just stick to the comics or source material? But in this case, they improved upon it. We also have the hijacked airplane scene. In the show, this is easily one of the most most horrific and evil Homelander moments. Basically what goes down is Homelander and Maeve show up to stop terrorists who hijacked an airplane. They both make quick work of the terrorists. After everyone on the plane thanks Homelander and Maeve, they go to check on the pilot. However, unknown to them, there's one more hijacker in the cockpit. But before Homelander can take him out, he shoots the last living pilot in the head. Homelander immediately uses his laser vision to take the terrorist's head off, but in doing so also blasts all the plane's controls, with it now being impossible for anyone to fly and land the plane safely. At this point, Maeve asks Homelander what they're going to do, and he basically says nothing. She suggests several things like flying all the passengers to the ground one by one, or even for him trying to lift the plane, but he turns them all down. In the end, she is forced to go with Homelander and watch everyone on the plane fall to their death. Homelander would then use this plane crash to help Vought's agenda of using soups for the military. Maeve would also use this incident later to blackmail and control Homelander, or at least try to. Now, the comic version of this is much different. It's still a plane that's hijacked by terrorists, but it's actually the Transoceanic Flight 37 plane that was headed for the World Trade Center Plaza. That's right, in the comics they had Homelander and Maeve intercept one of the 9/11 planes. Now, after Homelander and Maeve take out the hijackers in the comic, which all goes down in issue 21 of The Boys, they realize they have no one to fly the plane as Black Noir is their pilot and he's not there. So while they're able to intercept the plane from being flown into the World Trade Center towers, they can't land or fly the plane, which inevitably leads it to crashing into the Brooklyn Bridge instead. Vought covered up the incident to make sure neither they nor the heroes could be blamed for what happened. Another massive difference in the show is that except for Butcher and now Huey, the boys don't use Compound V. And in the comics, they have no problem using it at all. This actually changes the dynamic greatly because in the show, the boys have no shot against the Seven whatsoever, minus Butcher and Huey, who have been using doses to give themselves temporary superpowers. I actually think this is one of the reasons the show is better, because the boys hunting down the Supes, not having powers themselves, makes for a way more interesting and compelling story, as us, the audience, is like, how in the hell are they ever gonna go up against superpowered beings with no powers? Don't get me wrong, the comic and original version is also cool, having superpowered humans hunting down Supes, and certainly made for some cool fight sequences in the books, but nonetheless, I agree with the approach Amazon took. Now, I think we could all agree that though The Boys show has a plethora of amazing characters played by great actors, Homelander, portrayed by Anthony Starr, is by far the best character of the show and one we love to hate. And that's because in the show, he is insanely unpredictable, conniving, irrational, and strategic with everything he does. And all of that with the powers he has makes him insanely dangerous. He's a master manipulator who uses people's fear of him to get them to do pretty much whatever he wants. Now, the crazy thing is, in the comic books, that is not Homelander at all. In fact, he's quite the opposite in the books. His power set is the same. He's still an incredibly powerful being that's Superman character and has an endless number of vices, loving to participate in adult activities, if you will. But in the comics, he is not a master manipulator, cunning, or any of those things. He's actually very much like a child, a spoiled little brat. We even find out he's basically a puppet being manipulated from behind the scenes. Jumping off that, another change for Homelander from the comics to the show is that in the comics, he hates Stillwell. And in the comics, Stillwell is a dude. James Stillwell, one of the high-ranking executives of Vought, who is ruthless and cold-blooded. However, in the show, they made Stillwell a woman, Madeline Stillwell, someone who Homelander has a very weird sexual relationship with. A relationship that includes him drinking her breast milk and thinking of her as a mother-like figure. Yeah, Homelander has some deep-seated issues. They also made Stillwell not as ruthless or intimidating as in the comic books. She's often terrified of Homelander, which was justified as Homelander eventually kills her. A super quick change, but something I think is worth noting, is that the Vought cinematic movie universe doesn't exist in the books. That was something added to the show to help play off the real superhero movie franchises like the MCU and DC Extended Universe. But I have to say, it definitely adds a lot more to the show's dynamic, as Supes are seen as full-blown celebrities who appear in movies and save the world. Now, this next one is crazy, as Ryan, Homelander's son, is way different in the show than he is in the comics. In fact, in the comics, he only appears in one issue. But first, let's talk about the show. Butcher is out for revenge on Homelander and Vought because he believes that Homelander R-worded and murdered his wife Becca, and he's right on one of those things. Because we would find out that Homelander did indeed R-word her, but he didn't kill her. Now, after his heinous act, Becca, Butcher's wife, would find out she's pregnant with Homelander's child, at which point she went to Vought and they made her sign an NDA, so she wasn't even able to tell her husband Butcher that she was pregnant with Homelander's baby. Eventually, she gives birth to Ryan and raised him secretly unknown to Butcher. Of course, this would all come to a head when Butcher finds out that Becca's actually alive and has a child with Homelander. And although not happy about the situation, she wasn't about to walk away from her child. Long story short, Ryan becomes a major plot point and character for The Boys TV series and seemingly appears to embrace his father's evil ways at the end of season 3. Now, in the comics, it is completely different. In issue 4 of Butcher Baker Candlestick Maker, we learn that yet again Becca is unwillingly impregnated by Homelander. And one night, lying in bed with Butcher, she goes into early labor with the baby bursting its way out of her stomach, hovering right next to Butcher with his laser eyes glowing. It then starts shooting its laser blast at Butcher, at which point he grabs a lamp by his bed and beats the baby to death. He then goes to check on Becca, but she's clearly dead as a baby just bursted out of her stomach all xenomorph style. So Ryan, Homelander's son, was handled much differently in the comics and only appeared very briefly. Now, here's the twist though, that also makes this way different from the show. Though it was Homelander who R-worded Becca in the comics, it wasn't the real Homelander. It was actually his clone, Black Noir. So he's still Homelander's kid, but from his clone. This brings us to our final difference from The Boys show and comic. In the comics, Black Noir is revealed to be a clone of Homelander in The Boys 65. Many of us comic book fans thought they were going to mimic this in the show, but they went a completely different direction. In the show, Black Noir's identity is held secret for quite some time, but it's ultimately revealed that Black Noir was originally a member of the superhero team Payback. They were the greatest superhero team of their time in the 1980s. They were essentially the original version of the Seven led by Soldier Boy, at least this is their origin in the show. We would learn Black Noir's real name is Irving. Black Noir eventually joins the Seven, where he is ultimately killed by Homelander in season 3 after Homelander finds out Black Noir knew Homelander had a dad out there and didn't tell him. But we are apparently getting a new Black Noir in season 4, which is leading me and I'm sure other people to think that maybe this new Black Noir will be the Homelander clone, eventually to be revealed somewhere down the line. But there you have it, friends, some of the major differences between the Boys TV series and the original comics. Going back to what I said earlier, the show is leaps and bounds better than the comic series, which is not something you will hear comic book fans say about a movie or a TV adaptation very often. So the Boys TV series is definitely the exception and not the rule. In any case, let us know what your favorite or least favorite difference is from the comics to the Amazon series. There are a few more that we didn't mention, as we just highlighted the biggest and most significant changes, so you definitely have some others you can cite. Other than that, we'll see you next time when we talk about all things comics.